Hello and welcome to the Global Hog Industry Virtual Conference Update. I'm Ann Hess. The Swine Health Information Center, along with the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research and Pork Checkoff, joined together to fund and launch a $2.3 million Wean-to-Harvest Biosecurity Research Program in the fall of 2022. The goal was to investigate cost effective, innovative technologies, protocols, and ideas to enhance biosecurity implementation during the wean to harvest phases of swine production. Joining us to discuss the latest results as well as opportunities for U.S. pork producers to enhance their biosecurity protocols is Lisa Becton, Swine Health Information Center. Welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for providing the opportunity to let us share about some really exciting results.
Before we dive into our discussion today, I'd like to remind the audience you can type your questions at any time in the chat and we will get those over to Lisa. So, Lisa, let's dive into that research updates that you have. The floor is now yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anne. I'm going to start just with a very brief review of the Swine Health Information Center. We were launched in 2015 with Pork Checkoff funding, and our mission really is to protect and enhance the health of U.S. swine herds by minimizing the impact of emerging diseases. And we do that through multiple mechanisms, including preparedness, communications, global disease monitoring, analysis of swine health data, and then I've got highlighted targeted research investments. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. And so when we look at wean-to-harvest biosecurity, why did we focus on that? Well, it was a producer-identified gap in biosecurity and also poses a risk backwards to our sow farms. And so there is the increased risk identified because obviously our grow finish production has direct contact with our harvest facilities. There are sometimes facility design limitations, meaning there may not be shower in and out available. We've got transportation challenges because we don't have enough trailers to wash every single trailer between every single load. And then also we may have shared crews and shared people that go in and out of multiple sites. And so again, our overall goal is to enhance wean-to-harvest biosecurity, prevent emerging disease, and also improve our overall swine health. And so because of this gap in biosecurity, we've partnered with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and the Pork Checkoff. We combined our funds to create a $2.3 million pool of resource monies. And then our focus as we work with our producers was on two different components, both the site, how we can improve site biosecurity, and then how we can improve transportation biosecurity. And the site biosecurity really is looking at bioexclusion. How do we prevent a pathogen from coming in, but also biocontainment, that if a site goes positive, how do we prevent that from getting out? So several different aspects. And that dovetails into what our priorities we're looking for. And so these are just broad categories, but looking at how do we increase biosecurity adoption and compliance at the site? How do we look at our mortality management and reduce the risk from that component? How do we reduce and implement biosecurity at our packing plants to prevent spread of disease in or out? And then what are alternatives to fixed truck washes, along with improving our truck wash efficiency? And then finally, looking at different methods for air filtration, really with the goal of either prevention of getting something in or releasing something out into the environment. And so where are we at? We have funded 13 site projects to date, and they really cover a whole bunch of different areas, from manure pumping, looking at electrostatic precipitation to contain aerosolized pathogens, the use of fan coverings to prevent pathogens going out, so biocontainment, looking at what bioexclusion practices are in place and the risks associated for prevention. We also looked at cost of disease. So what does our biosecurity implementation actually cost compared to the risk of disease introduction? Other items include self-vaccination strategies to reduce the need for multiple crews, automated power washers, again, to really reduce labor, multiple or mobile farm entry systems. How can we replace the water-based shower in and out systems and still get into farms cleanly? looking at biosecurity compliance and how do we measure that, as well as looking at what are motivation and barriers for compliance. And then lastly, assessing our dead box. How do we reduce the risk of viral introduction from that area? And so the next few slides, I'm going to cover some brief results and updates that we have. So the first one really was covering a study looking at fan coverings and how could they be used to prevent the spread of viruses out of a positive farm. And this project was done by Dr. Aaron Kettlecamp out of the Swine Veterinary Center. And essentially they assessed 3 different types of materials, looking at a nylon fan sock, a blue poly or polyclean tarp, and then a black privacy screen, with the goal of reducing the particles that are going out of the exhaust fan. Because we know certain viruses like PRRS and PED carry a certain particle size. And if we can reduce large particles from being spread out into the environment, potentially we have the ability to reduce the amount of disease that is spread there. And so what was found through the assessment of these different types of fan coverings is that the fan sock was the most effective exhaust covering that could be used to reduce the dust particle dispersion. And so this was done at multiple distances from the farm, 1 meter, 1 meter, 3 meters, and 5 meters. And this was found to be most effective at 1 meter. The other fan socks, other fan coverings didn't work as well as the nylon sock. And so as a result, there is an opportunity to use a readily available material to help have biocontainment of pathogens in a positive farm. The next project we assessed was manure and what is the risk associated with manure application and spread of pathogens like PRRS and PED. And this project was led by Dr. Silva and Moraes out of Iowa State University. And essentially they looked at a barn history of what type of manure pumping happened at the sites and did they subsequently break with either PRRS or PED. And so this was broken into 2 parts, the retrospective barn assessment and then a forward-looking prospective study on pigs that were placed and then checking them for oral fluids for presence of virus for PED and PRRS. Essentially what was found is that manure and land application does pose a risk for the introduction of PRRS into farms. And this is important because we're obviously into that time of season right now. So it's always important to keep that in mind. The other things that were determined is the risk increases at nurseries for potential introduction versus grow finish sites. But the risk of PRRS introduction also occurs if manure application happens when pigs are placed less than 16 weeks of age. And so this may also help when you're assessing manure application, looking at the age of the pigs placed, but also looking at what age are they, nursery or grow finish sites. Interestingly enough, this particular project did not notice an association with PED and land application. And so that was a little bit different, potentially from what was expected. But again, it gave us objective information on manure application. The next study was assessed by Dr. Mike Chetta out of Talent Metrics, assessing worker motivation and biosecurity compliance. And so this study was really done to assess about 139 workers that's looking at multiple factors of behavioral intent to apply for biosecurity, looking at what behavioral controls are perceived by the workers, their attitudes and social norms. And what was found in this study was that animal caretaker motivation and compliance can be positively influenced by several different things. And one of those being rewarding or some type of reward system when personnel are following biosecurity protocols and are executing them to prevent diseases from entry, but also looking at providing supervisor support and resources to help workers do their job, meet the time constraints and the demands that working with animals it presents, but also providing performance feedback to employees to help them with adherence to biosecurity practices. So it is something to continue to focus on our workers to look at how these different motivational things affect performance on farm. The next area we were looking at is transportation for biosecurity assessments. And so again, we have multiple projects focusing on different aspects of transportation, including alternative cleaning methods, looking at truck cab disinfection, looking at how do we classify sanitation status, what tools can be used to assess the status and cleanliness of a trailer, evaluating rerouting of trailers and networks, and also a cost benefit of what that may look like, looking at the proportion of trailers that need to be washed and disinfected for adequate risk reduction, evaluating motor or waterless mobile decontamination structures instead of still static facilities, and then really assessing what is the risk of contamination at the packing plant. And that's looked at because trailers obviously go back and forth, and what risks do those present? And so several projects to highlight. The first one was done by Dr. Dustin Bowler at Carthage Veterinary Services. And the goal was to assess, are there available tools that producers and truck wash staff can use to assess right at the trailer the status of their cleaning protocols? And so one of the mechanisms that they identified was the use of ATP swabs or bioluminators. And essentially those reflect light compared to what organisms and organic material they find in the RNA of those materials or pathogens or bacteria. And so they compared that to bacterial plate counts to say, what are the two differences between these methods of swabs, and can they be used to assess trailer sanitation? And so what was found throughout the research is that yes, these two different methods can be used to provide an objective measurement of trailer sanitation. And so that's something that our truck wash could use when they're going through each processes, and even through training of truck wash staff. Other outcomes of the trial was to look at where are more contaminated areas likely to be. So several different areas of the trailers were assessed. The swabs did not go inside the trailer. They did not go into the truck to swab them. So all of these points of access were from exterior of the trailer. And so the ones that were noticed to be more likely contaminated were the nose access door and the back door flush gates. And so this highlights the need to really assess all the different points of the trailer, but making particular note for these two that also may lead to more contaminated areas, and a good part for assessment. The next trailer we were looking at was done by Dr. Daniel Linares and Edison Megales with Iowa State University. And the goal was to establish or evaluate, are there different resources available for truck washes that producers could access? And then also, is there available technology producers can use to help assess trailer sanitation? The first part was a project done to help update the inventory for public truck washes, mainly in the main hog producing states. And that's with the work with the Iowa Pork Industry Center, and the link is available there. And so this project helped to continue to update that list to identify different available truck washes for the public. And so that's a good resource people can address when they're looking where they need to wash and disinfect trailers. The second component of the trial, again, was to look at what's available to help automate a trailer sanitation process and to be able to identify what happens during that process. And so they applied a GPS beacon approach on trucks and trailers, and then also utilized a clean trailer application to look at how to assess sanitation of trailers. And what was found that both of these applications for tracking of vehicles to plants and back to cleaning and wash sites really are available and can be used to automatically assess how trailer sanitation is occurring. And so the Clean Trailer app, while not as accurate as GPS, did provide a visual representation or pictures of each trailer that can be done by the truck wash personnel. And so not only can they record the trailer, the time when it came in, but they can also record the status of the trailer before sanitation and after sanitation. So again, a visual record. So good to have information for that component. The last transportation project to highlight was one by Dr. Gustavo Machado with North Carolina State University. And this project really was to assess the role that transportation plays in the risk of disease spread and what can be done to effectively reduce that risk. And this trial was really looking at movement of animals and trailers and additional people, service, feed trucks, and establish what are the networks of contact using these vehicles between multiple farm sites, sanitation, cleanliness areas, as well as the plant. And then building that model to show interconnectivity. The goal of this project was really to look at what could we do to reduce ASF risk of spread should that virus ever be found in the US. However, it can also be very relevant when we look at any of our other pathogens such as PRRS or PED. And so what they found is that the vehicles inherently have a high degree of interconnectivity with systems. They monitored over 820 trucks with 2 different regions with over 6,200 different sites involved. And so there's a tremendous amount of interconnectivity of vehicles and farms, regardless of whether we do sanitation or not. However, what was identified is that vehicle sanitation, as much as physically possible, can still reduce the contact links between sites and have a reduction in the chance of disease spread through vehicle contacts. And so that did occur between crew transport vehicles, pigs going to market, and pigs between farms. So again, this project highlights that the importance of sanitation during any kind of production process, whether it be for assessment of a foreign animal disease, but even for endemic pathogens. So finally, just a review slide. Again, all of this information, including our final reports for any of our Wean-to-Harvest Biosecurity research, as well as other research that SHIC performs, can be found at www.swinehealth.org. Also, you can sign up for our monthly newsletters because we do highlight research results in that format as well. And so if you sign up for that site, you'll automatically get information on a monthly basis of what's going on with SHIC. And so that's right now the end of my slides.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for that insight. It's great to get update on some of those research projects. You know, as you were presenting, I kind of saw maybe a key component that, especially in the transportation area, where maybe communication, there's some issues there between what's happening at the truck wash and those trucks heading back and forth, but also on the employees side, we talked about biosecurity compliance and getting that positive feedback. Would you say communication's been kind of a key issue here?
You know, communication is a huge one because I think one thing is of communication of what you want to have. So, for example, if you're looking at truck wash, it's a really hard job. I mean, and it's trying to crawl around the trailers and clean all the nooks and crannies. So being able to communicate the level of sanitation that you want is really important, but also to be able to automate these processes, because if we can help people out and do their job a little bit better and provide automated systems to get that done, that is so critical. And that comes back to communication of resources and support from supervisors and other areas, trying to identify where can we support all of our swine workers throughout the system to make their jobs a little more effective and potentially easier for them to do.
Yeah, and I know a couple of them were talking about apps and things like that. If you, for producers that are listening here, if they were going to maybe implement something in the next 2 to 3 weeks, what would you say, or maybe things that you present here would be maybe the most easiest as far as cost and implementation, adaptation across the system?
Sure. You know, I won't say that I'm a wizard with apps, but I think, you know, evaluating some of these apps that you can take pictures and track your systems, even using GPS, if you already have GPS on your, you know, trucks or trailers, to be able to track where they go, that's really important because we know vehicles have to do so many different things and we're constantly moving pigs to different areas of production. You know, utilizing the information, if you already have that, is really, really helpful. and that research project shows a model to be able to do that. Other things that may not be an app, but looking at manure application, that's occurring right now in the fall as we're getting, working on harvest and finishing harvest, because trying to think in the back of your mind, where are you at on your farms where you're having to go land apply, and then how do we reduce that risk for disease spread?
So, and I'll just remind the audience, if you have any questions for Lisa, please post those there in the chat and we'll try to get them over to her as time allows. I know this when you started 2 years ago, the project is Wean to Harvest. Were there any areas that you were hoping to get some research in and didn't cover? Is there thoughts for in the future for looking at this again?
I think we'll always have some degree of incorporation of this area of focus, because while this was a nice effort, over these last 2 years, there's always questions that we come up. And some of that includes continuing to look at our cull depots or other points of concentration and what do we do for biosecurity there. We have received several plant projects, which are really good because we're working in coordination with them, but always trying to understand, these more complex areas of how do they impact disease transmission. And so while we have a lot more on some of the looking at apps and other things like that, I think we still need to keep, our eyes on the prize for some of our points of concentration. How do they work? And then how also do we, can we redesign or re-engineer some of our existing systems to make them more biosecure and effective to work in, to use in, or even upgrade for biosecurity?
So, I mean, Wean-to-Harvest Biosecurity, you've covered a lot of research projects here. What would you say are maybe the 2 to 3 key takeaways that producers need to keep in mind when it comes to setting up their SOPs and implementing them on a daily basis?
Sure. As I kind of look at it, grow finish has always been one that's not necessarily had a lot of focus, but I think it has a lot of reach. And so what I take away out of this is all of the procedures that we do on grow finish can potentially present a risk backwards into the system to our south farm production. And so if you have systems that have all of those incorporated, focusing on grow finish biosecurity can not only prevent disease introduction, give you healthy pigs that can go to market, but also preserve and protect our sow units by preventing and stopping that potential backflow of pathogens into that area. And so transportation is still going to be key because, again, we have to move pigs around. So whether they come from sow farm to grow finish or nursery to grow finish to the plant, that's one area that touches everything. And so that's another key area to do and to assess how best we can maximize cleaning and usage of our trailers. And there's a lot of different options, but those are probably the two key take homes. On farm, prevent things from coming in and doing as much as we can to stop diseases coming in, but then also on trucking to ensure that we're making the best process we can to clean most trailers as we can, as frequently as we can.
And we didn't even discuss foreign animal disease today. And, all of this plays right into hand in prevention and preparedness, I'm sure.
It does. When we look at biosecurity, I think a lot of times it doesn't really matter what disease that you're trying to look at, because biosecurity works for a lot of diseases. And it's really core and centralized to any kind of prevention of pathogens coming in, whether it's a new and emerging disease, as we really want to focus on for SHIC, but also foreign animal diseases, but even for movement and spread of things like PRRS, PED, mycoplasma, a lot of things that, really give us problems on a day-to-day basis. So I look as biosecurity as kind of a generalized core set of things to do to ensure we have, healthy growing pigs.
Lisa Becton, Swine Health Information Center, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today and sharing this valuable insight.
Thanks. Really appreciate the chance to visit with you.